The Uganda State of Oil and Gas Sector feature is brought to you by Accord in partnership with Cisco, NTV.
Uganda ranks amongst the top 10 biodiverse countries in the world. The Albertine Rift, where oil and gas were discovered, is one of the most important regions for conservation in Africa. The rift extends nearly 1,000 miles from the border between northwestern Uganda and northeastern DRC down through Rwanda and Burundi to Malawi. Dotted with mountains and pockmarked with lakes, the region is considered one of the most biodiverse places on the continent and is home to many animal and plant species that evolved in isolation and are endemic, meaning they are found nowhere else in the world. It also has fisheries, which is a source of livelihood for communities that live in this area. But a recent study estimates that nearly half of the Albertine Rift's endemic species may have become threatened with extinction by 2080 as climate change shrinks their habitat. The study was conducted by researchers with institutions in the US and UK who synthesized data on 162 plant and animal species found only in the Albertine Rift region. The study also finds certain species have already lost as much as 90% of their habitat to agriculture. Government recently revealed that it could conclude the much-vaunted final investment decision with global oil companies next month. Once the FID is sealed, oil companies will inject billions of dollars into an economy currently roiled by the COVID-19 pandemic. But fears abounding that huge infrastructure projects could alter the rich biodiverse ecosystem in the Albertine Graben if there are no safeguards to protect the fragile area. Amongst the major projects which will be undertaken is the 1,445-kilometer East African crude oil pipeline, which will snake through Hoima in midwestern Uganda to Chongolein Terminal in Tanga at the Indian Ocean. NTV spoke to Pauline Mike Ronald, the head of environment and biodiversity to TAL UNP Uganda, who says the oil company has a robust plan to address these concerns.
From that perspective, we opted to apply the International Finance Corporation Environment and Social Sustainability Standards. So these are globally recognised as the gold standard to ensure environment and social sustainability in the area. So also in line with that, we will be adopting the UN guiding principles on human rights also. So it's very important for us to ensure that we have the proper safeguards in place. Our principles have been to avoid impact as much as possible. So that's the start of the starting point.
Isaac Tunju, the National Environment Management Authority Principal Environmental Officer in charge of oil and gas, says there is a safety net to protect the fragile ecosystem.
So all the oil and gas developments that are taking place in this country or that are to take place, number one, they are subjected to a very, very robust environmental and social impact assessment regime. And what do we do in the ESIA regime, environmental and social impact assessment? Herein, we are able to identify the obvious impacts. If you are unable to identify the obvious impacts, at least you should be able to predict them. And following the identification or prediction of impacts, we take them through a very, very careful evaluation.
The Petroleum Authority Uganda, which is the regulator of the oil and gas sector, says environment protection is recognized at policy level.
Closely with other government institutions, such as the National Environment Management Authority, Uganda Wildlife Authority, the Fisheries Development, the Directorate of Fisheries Resources, the Ministry of Agriculture, and all the other agencies that handle aspects related to the environment to ensure that environment protection and biodiversity protection are key in the considered in the oil and gas operations. So there is established a policy framework. First of all, it's important for us to consider this at a strategic level. So our national oil and gas policy, one of its objectives is to ensure environment protection.
Another sticky issue is in regard to the practice of commencing land acquisition prior to the completion of environment and social impact assessment.
By multinational companies, okay? or IOCs, international oil companies. And so the IOCs have standards that govern the sector beyond the laws of the land. So we have the International Financing Corporation standards, performance standards. You might have heard of them. These are standards that ideally ensure, they put in place safeguards to ensure that developments do not affect people and the environment.
The Albertine has numerous water bodies, including Lake Albert, rivers Nile, Wambia, and Semuliti. An oil spill in the area could affect tourism, fishing activities, and wildlife habitats. So what is the progress in regard to the National Environment Oil Spills Contingence Plan?
We are glad to inform you that just last December, the legal framework was concluded. We have regulations governing the possibility or occurrence of oil spills. The National Environment Oil Spills Preparedness and Response Regulations. Okay, so the law is in place. The National Oil Spill Contingence Plan has been prepared by the Office of the Prime Minister, the Directorate for Disaster Preparedness, in collaboration with NEMA and the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. These institutions have been doing a lot of work, and we are proud to say that, and glad to inform you that the National Oil Spill Contingence Plan shall be out and in place before we start production.
You also have to appreciate that having visibility on the nature of the projects and their size was important for the process of developing the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan, because you'll have to know your area, your geographical area of scope. And so now that we know where the where the pipelines will pass, you know, where the processing facilities are exactly going to be located, where the infield pipelines are, we have all this information that feeds into the document. And so that is why it has taken some bit of time, but now it has come together, and we are working very closely with the Prime Minister's Office, NEMA, and the other government agencies. So the final draft is in place and should be approved.
Setting any residual impact. So that means that we want to work with the conservation partners in the area, the Uganda Wildlife Authority, the communities, to ensure that we actually have programs in place that will enhance the biodiversity of the area whilst sustaining community activities and livelihoods. So that's something that's quite new to Total, but it's an approach that we have committed to, particularly because of the sensitivities of the Lake Albert area.
The Uganda State of Oil and Gas Sector feature was brought to you by Accord. The Uganda State of Oil and Gas Sector feature is brought to you by Accord in partnership with Cisco, NTV.